In this video, we are going to examine the graph, hand histories, and play of a winning player, a 100 NL student I've been working with for a few months who has just achieved these results at 100 Zoom on PokerStars. This is a player who has gone from strength to strength. He's just survived the recent downswing and came out of it swinging. But still, this guy can really improve his game. We are going to critique a bunch of his hands today in this video. But here's the message. If a winning player, someone who is doing really well at a game like 100 Zoom, which is not an easy game these days on PokerStars, can still improve and is still making lots of mistakes, then the ceiling is high. The games are beatable. The scope for success is still there. Don't listen to these naysayers who tell you that online poker is dead and 25 NL is so difficult and impossible to beat and you should just give up. Nobody wins online poker. It's a mug's game, innit? Maybe it's too hard for them. Maybe they would prefer it if nobody could succeed, because then it wouldn't be their fault that they're failing. But that attitude is the worst possible attitude you can have. Let's get into this guy's play and let's find out, why is he doing so well? So the other thing I want to look at with this graph is the red line, blue line distribution. You can see here the student doesn't have this modern day, highly sought after, sexy red line that's like going up to the sky, because the student's not playing a kind of mindless running people over strategy here. His game does have exploits in it. The student's actually more of an exploitative player, I would say, than a theoretical player, but does have a kind of implicit solid grasp of theory as well. But this student just does really well with the blue line, like definitely very good at folding in spots that are going to be underbluffed. I think the student's biggest strength is that he's very capable of pulling the trigger on big folds that other people can't make and just being super disciplined when his hand is in really bad shape against the population's actual range. So he's making these not totally heroic folds, but just really good folds on a regular basis. And that's keeping the blue line so healthy. Yes, it's at the expense of the red line, but it's actually this guy here that we really care about, the green line. And players who are more inclined to make big folds and good folds are going to have a worse red line than players who are just finding more really good bluffs than good folds. So it's very possible that some students crush a game like this by finding really good spots to hero call, bluff, run people over. And this student does some of that, but this student, as I say, is more geared towards like being very accurate with where he invests money, how much money he invests, that sort of thing. And then other players who are just really good at folding when they should and maybe aren't finding as many of the really good bluffing spots are going to run a really positive blue line and losing red line. The goal with this student is to improve his red line. It's to get him aggressing in more situations and shying away from good aggressive spots a bit less. But don't get me wrong, this is not a guy that's like petrified and scared and barely investing money. This red line is losing, but it's not terrible. And you can see just how much the blue line is making up for this. So the moral of the story, before I show you some hands, is that you don't have to have a particular distribution of blue line, red line within reason. As long as your red line isn't totally hemorrhaging, and as long as your blue line isn't totally hemorrhaging money, you're likely going to be okay. The idea is that just by improving your play, your EV, your accuracy in lots of spots, you can get your green line to go up more. And that's what it's all about. So let's take a look at how this student is achieving this good win rate at 100 Zoom. This is a really gross spot. Let's take a look at how we got here. So we have Queen 8 of clubs in the big blind. Villain opens the small blind here. I believe this is some kind of regular by the looks of it. We have 2k hands on this player. The VPIP PFR is 26-22. So definitely looks like a reg. Only play to call pre. Only play to call again on the flop here. Big blind against small blind c-bet. 5 of hearts turn. Villain goes for an overbet, confirming the reg status. Recreational players are very rarely going to do this. We call again. Again, the only play. First 3 streets, you can't really go wrong. I wouldn't do anything any differently. I don't think you guys would either. But the river is where things get a bit spicy. So Villain goes for this block bet. Now, what do we think of this, guys? This block bet, in theory, probably does have some slow plays in it. And by slow plays, I mean hands that have the equity to go all in or bet bigger, but are choosing to bet smaller. Because a flush river is a bit polarizing for our range. And it's going to mean that we have quite a lot of natural folds to a bigger bet, and we have quite a lot of natural raises to this sizing because we have a load of flushes. So using this bet size with a nutted hand is defensible in a spot like this because you can be bluff raised by hands like ace 10 with the ace of clubs or ace jack with the ace of clubs. You can also be value raised by hands like the queen high flush or nut flush. So it makes sense to put some of your really good hands into this sizing. I don't think the average player at 100 NL is doing a good enough job of putting those really big hands into this sizing. I think the queen high flush would be a raise anyway in theory, and so I definitely think that we should raise here. The student goes kind of small. I like this. I think you could go a little bit bigger, but this is definitely a good sizing, and faces this jam. So this is a really annoying spot because you don't need a lot of equity to call here. You're getting almost 3-1. You need almost like as low as 25% equity to flick this in. And it can be really difficult to process this spot in real time because this spot involves what I call fortune reversal, which is the idea that things were going really well. We're on the river. We had a flush. We just made a flush. We're feeling good about it. We face a sizing that indicates that we likely have a ton of equity, so much equity in fact that we can raise for value and try and get even more money out of villain, but then the worst possible thing happens. And the biggest problem that people encounter in a spot like this is that they don't take the time to compute the fortune reversal, the fact that things have just gone the worst way they possibly could, and the EV has just plummeted. What is the opponent's range here for making this play? What do you think? Well, in the real world, it's very likely going to be completely nutted. Because to bluff here, okay, you could have had a hand like ace-jack with the ace of clubs that you just decided to use a really small bet with. I don't buy that. So that's one hoop that pool has to jump through. With the ace of clubs blocker, they have to resist bluffing bigger. Some people will even check that hand because they just don't like bluffing, but for the most part, people will bluff bigger with that hand. And then if they have bluffed small with it, they then have to find the rejam over this very scary looking play. So it's probably happening sometimes, but for the vast majority of human beings, probably about 80 to 90% of them just don't have any bluffs at all in their locker. Well, what does that mean if 80 to 90% of humans just don't ever bluff this spot by 3-betting the river all in? It means that you just can't possibly get 25% equity against pool, because if 80% of people have 0 bluffs, then you're already max case 20%, even if everybody else only has bluffs, and that's not the case. So in real life, your equity here is sub 20%. It's probably between 10 and 20%, I would guess, because the people who do bluff here are probably really over bluffing, but there's just not enough of them. And so this hand is a fold. How many students fold this spot, in my opinion? I would say, quite honestly, about 30%. Something like that, 25-30% of people. Okay, I'm not being fair here to people that play 100 or 200 or 500 or 1k NL or anything like that. I'm talking about my students that play microstakes. I teach all different kinds of players. I teach professional players that play higher than this. I teach people who are just starting out, who are playing lower than this. And it's very common that I just teach like a 100 NL grinder looking to get to 200. That's really common too. But of the people who play lower, like 25 NL, 10 NL, probably very few of them are ever making this fold, even though at those stakes it's even more important to make that fold. So we have this kind of weird contradictory thing where the players playing in the games where this is even more under bluffed are less likely to make the fold because they just don't have the discipline, the skill, and the sort of versatility here to reset out of that mode where they were value betting a really good hand and into a mode where they have a bluff catcher, a hand that only beats bluffs against an under bluffed range. So I really like this fold that Hero makes here. Extremely good play. This is the kind of thing that's responsible for that winning graph, for that soaring blue line. Yeah, the red line's going to swallow up all the losses of this, but that's okay. If you never make good folds, you're going to have a really good red line, but you're going to have a horrible green line and blue line. So it's okay for the red line to take the hit here. You don't have to try and beef up your red line like some kind of insecure Johnny Bravo reg that wants to be all muscular on the outside, but is falling apart on the inside and not beating the game. You don't want to be that. Be brave, be bold, make the fold. I like that slogan. That works. How did we get into this spot? In quite a medium-sized pot here with King 6 offsuit. King 6 offsuit on the river. Okay, we go for a little bluff here. How did we get here? Is this hand okay? Let's take a look. In the big blind here with the King 6 off, villain opens the small. We 3-bet to 9 big blinds. What a terrible play. You can't 3-bet King 6 off. This is awful. How is this student winning? Let me tell him how bad this is right now. It's really shit play. You should be fucking ashamed of yourself, you moron. Explain yourself now. Otherwise, I can't coach you anymore. Bro. Enter. Okay, we'll see what he says in response to that, but yeah, really bad play. Of course it's actually fine, guys. Nothing wrong with this play. This is a polarized 3-bet. If you're never 3-betting King 6 off in hands of this ilk from the big blind against small blind, then you, my friend, do not understand polar big blind versus small blind play. You don't get it. Get a grip of yourself. Learn poker. This is fine. You're meant to have some bluffs here. The EV is the same as folding. Therefore, you can do it. You can't do it with king deuce off though, because that's worse than the EV of folding. That's minus EV. And you can't do it with king six suited, because that's better to call than it is to do this. It's about comparing the EV of one line to another, not one hand to another. Oh, I'd rather have king six suited. Yeah, no shit. But that's not a good 3-bet. That's a call. This hand's an okay 3-bet. Okay, so that's how it works. Good. Glad we got that sorted. How many of you believe that I was actually messaging the student? Hands up in chat, in the comments if you did. Anyways, we check the flop here. I think this is fine. Queen 10-8 is an okay board for our range. Like our big stuff, our ace queen, our 10s, our 8s, our aces, our kings, our king jack are all doing rather well here. But the problem is that we have a lot of really awful hands in our range as well, like the jack 5 suited and the king 6 off and the ace 4 off and stuff like that, the ace 7 off. All these bluffs have whiffed entirely. Villain, on the other hand, the small blind, is doing pretty well on a board like this for sure. Like hands like 9s, 10s. 10s should 4-bet a lot. It won't always in reality. Ace queen, queen jack, jack 9, 10, 9. The list goes on. There's quite a lot of good hands here for villain as well. There's a few whiffs like 5s and ace 5 suited and stuff for villain, but definitely less airballs. Not Nick airballs, guys. No, I would never refer to Nick airball in a YouTube video. I mean actual airball hands. There's less of those in villain's range than there are in ours, so definitely building some kind of check back here seems good. The jack is a real powerhouse of a card for our range. Like on the one hand, our jack X hands don't want to bluff anymore, like our jack 5, jack 6 suited, jack 4 suited. Yes, those are also 3-bet bluffs pre, guys. Learn pre-flop poker. Stop 3-betting linear out of the big blind against small blind. How many times do I have to tell you this? That gets there in the sense that it hits a pair that doesn't want to bluff anymore. Of course, our queen X, our 10X have some showdown value. It's kind of hard for us to have nothing now. I guess we still have like ace 7, ace 4, king 6, king 7, stuff like that. But those hands are quite good now. Like they have a lot of redraws. So the equity of our range has just shot up a bit. The nut advantage here is absolutely terrifying. And here, this check, I actually don't like it. Like I think theoretically you can either check or bet this hand. I think it's definitely going to fall into the category of optional bluff. More on that, check out Carrot Poker School Grade 1 Lecture 2 on value betting. Optional, mandatory and prohibited bluffs. Sorry, Lecture 3 on bluffing. But we also do have a similar metric for value betting in Grade 1 Lecture 2. Check out the Carrot Poker School at carrotcorner.com. The background to this table is no coincidence. It's all about carrots here, guys. You know that. So when we go for this check, I think we're missing out on a couple of like really cool red line hungry points. So firstly, how many people do a fantastic job at 100 Zoom of protecting their checking range adequately here? Because on a card like this, honestly, villains should probably check almost everything. And I just don't think that's happening. I think people with 9s here, 10, 9, jack 9, queen 9, 9, 8 suited, are getting a bit greedy and just leading. I think some sets are leading, pocket 8s, pocket 10s. I think some 2 pairs probably leading. I think a lot of bluffs are being missed. Like I don't think ace 5 suited is being found. If villain is building like the leading range, I don't think he's finding that often enough. So I just think this spot is going to be underprotected when it's checked. And I think the exploit here is to go from an optional bluff with the king 6. This is a hand that would bluff almost all day anyway in equilibrium, but to ramp this up to like a pure bluff and just overbet. Just go like 21 and send out the message, you know, get the megaphone here and just say to villain, I have ace king. Because that's pretty terrifying. Okay, we shouldn't rep hands. We shouldn't bet here just because we're trying to pretend we have ace king. But let's beta sizing that our 9x or king 9. We have king 9 off here, by the way. Not king 9 suited. That ain't a 3-bet. King 9 off is a 3-bet. We can have king 9 off here. Villain can't have king 9 off. That would be diabolical. Villain can't have ace king. That would be diabolical. We just have so many more straights and big sets and stuff like that. And we can slow play flop sometimes as well and still have like a really nice hand that we had on the flop here too. So I definitely think this is a pure bluff spot for me in reality. I don't really like the check. I do like the fact that we bluffed the river. We definitely have to bluff the river now. We went for this sizing. Again, I explained to the student in our coaching session here that like his thought process was, yeah, I'm just going to try and make him fold like ace X or pocket 7s or something like that. And my rebuttal was, well, ace X should probably just be bluffing like every single time now. What air does villain actually have on this river? Like what absolute air does he have? Not going to have anything worse than like ace 4, right? That's going to be the absolute rock bottom of range. That should bluff. Probably 6s and 4s and 7s should bluff as well. So realistically, these hands are gone. Is this bet really that good? I mean, it's okay, but you can also use a bigger bet here. You could have checked back the turn with some 2 pair, with some sets, with some ace queen. This sizing's okay, but I think you can even go a bit bigger. What the student did here was twofold. One, He got worried on the turn. He was just like picturing the opponent having Jack 9, 10, 9, Queen 9. Sometimes our brains do this. They go to like one exact hand and just picture that, and it's a real problem. Do you ever find yourself doing that? Where your head just goes to like a part of villain's range that you're fearing or really don't feel comfortable about playing against, and then you just picture it and start almost like playing through fear? That's definitely happened here. Another interesting thing that happened in this hand is that the student reported this hand occurring right at the end of a winning session. And for some of you, you might think, well, in a winning session, wouldn't you be more confident and more willing to throw money about? This student has a mental game leak of wanting to go into his shell during a winning session and lock up profit. And he knows consciously that this is a bad thing to do, that this doesn't make any rational sense and it's throwing away EV. But subconsciously, it's a battle, and it's something we've just started working on in the last week or so, because there's so many things to fix in coaching sometimes. You can't just do everything at once. So we're now getting to this. It's been on our list for a while, and we're now treating this mental ailment of trying to lock up profit. The student was winning then this day. He wanted to lock up profit. He didn't want to go for like 22 big blinds on turn and then jam river, but I think that line is going to be really successful here against pool. I think the turn range is going to be a bit underprotected. The fold equity is going to be stellar. It should be really good. Then on the river, there was a bit of a mental game leak here as well, I think, because we were discussing sizing here, and the student had this idea that like a pair wouldn't fold, so like the only thing that would fold is ace-x or something like sixes. Like a pair on the board wouldn't fold. Basically, he just come up with this really arbitrary, like unjustified idea that villain had ace-jack or king-jack or ace-10 or king-10 or king-queen, that they wouldn't fold to like a pot-size bet or a B75, and I just think that's wildly untrue. I think a load of one pair is folding here. Maybe they'll call, maybe they won't, but I don't think we should just be forming these really strong judgments about exactly what villain is going to do with a certain hand unless we know the player a lot better. All right, let's look at one more. Man, such a gross spot. We need to stop getting into these getting jammed on in the river situations, man. They're not profitable. Let's see how we got here. King, queen of hearts on the button. We decide to call pre here. So this is something you can do. You can 3-bet or you can call here. One thing the student does a really good job of actually is mixing in lines that should actually be mixed in that are passive. There's definitely this like groupthink mentality, this like monkey see, monkey do ethos, particularly in the live poker scene where people just like follow each other, like it's like pop culture of poker thoughts. But also online, like at low stakes, micro stakes and stuff as well, we have this like blind leading blind idea that like if you have top pair, you bet the turn. If you have king queen suited pre, you 3-bet. Just this like really stupidly unaware, oblivious mindset that like one play is standard and the other one isn't a thing in spots where theoretically there are two options. So it's really good to know where there are a couple of options so that you don't feel randomly compelled to just do one of them. It just creates bias. It's not that healthy. Here, I actually really like the call with this player in the big blind. When there's sufficient the big blind here and you 3-bet, you take them out of the equation a lot more often, and therefore the EV that comes from them playing badly post flop just doesn't exist that often. And if you do have like your 3-bet cold called, you won't be in as good shape anyway with king queen. So the way to get money in against lots of really bad hands here against this player is to call. So if you made me guess, I would actually say that I think calling is higher EV than 3-betting here. I don't even think it's a guess. I think it just is. But anyway, this player does go away this time, but it's not the point. King, jack 7. Villain checks. This is definitely a board that the pre-flop aggressor can continue to do a lot of betting on. It is true that when you get cold called under the gun against button, you should go into your shell on most boards. You should start by checking. It's almost like being in the big blind against an opening range. You just have a disadvantage because the cold caller on the button just has so much more of a compact, airless pocket pair heavy range. So on a board like 9-8-3, yeah, you want to check everything. 10-6-4, you want to check everything. 5-4-3, check everything. King jack 7, you can do some betting. Small bet is right here, I would imagine. If you're building a range that contains king queen, king 10, ace jack here for betting, you can go small. Actually, now I think about it, I might just play a big bet only strategy in this spot. In fact, I definitely would. I take back what I said. I prefer a big bet here because what I would do in this situation is I'd start by acknowledging that my range isn't doing amazingly well here. It's doing fine. But I'd also acknowledge that I don't really need to reopen the action in position here with hands like 8s or 9s or 7x or queen jack or jack 10. So if I'm going to bet something like ace jack plus or king 10 plus or something here, note I don't really have king 8, king 5, king 4 either, so I don't have that many thin value bets. I can just build my value range around a big sizing, and I would say it's going to be an improvement here just to do that. Just bet big here with king queen if we're going to bet. Sometimes check it. Bet big with 7s if we're going to bet it, you know, which we are. And not bother with a small bet here. That'd be my advice. It just cleans things up a bit. So on the turn, a lot of people fall into this trap, as I was saying, of just randomly betting all of their top pair and checking second pair and worse, and under bluffing as well on cards like this. So what you want to make sure that you do here is that you can probably bet this hand at some frequency, but you also want to check pretty often with this hand. Like villain does have some 8s, some 10-9. Again, after they called the small bet, some 8-7, stuff like this. This is a decent card for both ranges. It's kind of a neutral environment, but you do want to make sure that you slow play some of your top pair and even some of your 2 pair here. Like if you have a hand like 7-8 here yourself, you can definitely check it back. It's not going to be a mandatory bet, I don't think, although most people will never find that play. So this student does do a good job of that normally. This time, I guess he decides to bet. He rolls a bet. This is fine. You're still getting called by like 9s and Jack 10 and Jack 9 and stuff like this. Like King Jack, King 9, King 6 suited. It's a value bet. It's thin, but it's a value bet. And then on the Queen River, I think our hand is actually not as good as it looks here. Like it's definitely still a value bet. I think you can get called by some worse hands here, but it's not as good as you would think. There's very little 2 pair here that you're actually beating because villain just doesn't have a lot of combos like Jack 7 or King 7 in these positions. They're going to raise flop with those or bet flop with those a lot. They're not really going to have too many combos of 7-8 in this position or anything like Queen 7 or Queen 8. So you're not really beating that many 2 pair. If they have aces or ace king, they may well check raise your small bet on the flop. So there's not even that much of that stuff getting there. So villain's actually a bit more polarized than I would like here. I don't know if that quite means that we go into like a nitty shell and start checking the river. I don't think it does. I don't think it's that bad. But certainly we're not doing that well here. And I might even downsize this bet here and go something like 40% pot or 50% pot. It's not normal for me to use these smaller sizes in position reopening action here. There's an argument for, well, if you're going to do that against a good player, shouldn't you just check? But no, I think that would be too passive. I think this is the spot where there is enough value for you to go ahead and value bet. But I would actually go smaller than this here. I think I would bet something like 14 here, 13, 12, something in that neck of the woods. Against a jam, I think we just probably have a really clear fold. Yes, some really good players will take Jack 10 here and bluff with it. The more I think about this, the more I'm kind of realizing that if villain is really competent, there are quite a lot of combos of Jack 10 offsuit here in hijack's range. That's possible. I'd feel way better about calling this if I A, knew that villain was a really aggressive reg or good reg, or B, if it was cut off and I knew they definitely had Jack 10. Because it's really easy to have too much Jack 10 here, because it's a hand that will check call flop, will check call turn, and may well jam river with these blockers. So I can see villain wanting that hand. It's also possible like King 10 can do this. Anything that blocks a straight that also has like a pair could do this. Queen 10 maybe, though I think that's usually check raising flop or turn. But anyway, like I think a good reg will, like, who's capable of bluffing here, may well over bluff here, because they just don't really have a lot of 10-9 combos after they don't raise turn. I don't think they're going to have a load of ace-10 here either, but they're going to have like ace-10 of spades, of course. But what villain's really repping here, I'm not actually sure. Like, it's just some weirdly played straight, or maybe like a set of queens, which is one combo. Yeah, this is bizarre, actually. Maybe I would just call here. When I first looked at this spot, I was like, yeah, we'll probably fold. And against like a weaker player or unknown, I might fold. But see, against a good reg, this could easily be overbluffed, and we might want to actually make an exception to the rule that river raises are underbluffed here, if the player type is right. I don't know who the opponent is, but I could certainly see somebody losing control entirely the minute they start raising King 10, Jack 10 willy-nilly, and they have offsuit combos of those. They're going to be way overbluffing because there's very few value combos that can play this way in the range that play so passively on flop and turn and then jam river. It's going to be super rare to run into 10-9 here. Like, there's only 10-9 suited, and I think it's very, very likely to either raise flop with a double gutter or to raise turn with the straight. So this could actually just be a good hero call-off spot with King-Queen. Probably not the combo you want to actually have here, but it's probably fine. I wonder if this is a spot we should just call, but yeah, very player dependent. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, guys, seeing how a winning 100 Zoom player handles different situations. As you can see, still lots of coaching to be done, loads of room for improvement. The sky's the limit. If a player like this, who is still improving and making mistakes and has loads of mental game issues, can crush 100 Zoom, so can you, with the right work ethic, a lot of time, the right guidance, and a lot of discipline. Not everybody watching this is going to get to this level. Most of you won't, but some of you will if you do the right things. The dream of online poker is still alive and well. It's just a bit harder than it was. It's going to take a lot of dedication and work, so you really need to decide if you want to make that commitment. even just to get to the level that this player's at just now takes quite a lot of commitment. If you like the way we teach the game, good news, a new product is landing on Carrot Corner very soon. That's Grady of the Carrot Poker School. In the meantime, do check out our existing courses, including our theory course, the main Carrot Poker School grades 1 through 3 on Carrot Corner. I'll see you guys for another video very soon. Bye for now.